Woo! Look at that. That was some awesome music. Hi, Shane. How you doing?
Hey, good. Nice to see you, Ian.
Yeah, great to see you. Well, welcome in everybody to another ZBrush stream. We have Shane Olson here today as a guest. Shane, always a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So if anybody who doesn't know Shane Olson, you definitely have to check him out because he's part of the 3D character workshop where he teaches stylized characters for a career, and it's super awesome. He has a plethora of just crazy credits. Dude, it's insane. So I won't I won't chat all day long about it, but it's super awesome. So today's going to be really cool because we're going over features and Redshift stuff with Shane and how he approaches stylized characters in Redshift with ZBrush 2023. So feel free, of course, like always, to take your questions. To ask your questions, I'll take them. And then we'll go through this process because there's a lot to show you. And yeah, we're really excited. So Shane, without further ado, man, I'm just going to hand it off to you and let you take the wheel.
All right. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for being here. It looks like a bunch of my students are in chat. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. And if you guys didn't know, I do stream every Monday at 11 a.m. on this same channel, I believe, on Maxon ZBrush channel. And I sculpt stylized characters every Monday there, so you can come hang out and chat and ask questions there as well. And yeah, I'm loving 2023. They actually, when I say they, I mean Maxon and the ZBrush team, they added some specific things that I asked them to add. With Sculptris Pro, I really love Sculptris Pro. It's a big part of my workflow. And with those of you who know, I have this project, this startup project that I save all of my settings in. And it's kind of this go-to project that has everything exactly perfect the way I want it. And it's set up for how ZBrush wants me to work. It's set up in the proper dimensions. I worked with Drust back in the day to get it just, you know. So when I was using Sculptris Pro with my default sphere size, I wasn't able to get the triangles to be small enough to add in as much detail as I wanted. So I reached out to the team at ZBrush at Maxon and asked them to it's still hard for me not to say Pixologic.
No worries, man. No worries.
Yeah, and they asked them to increase that triangle size, and they did. And also I asked them if they could add a picker, and they did. So I'd like to demo that now and show you guys how that works. This is the ruler file. There really isn't that much to it. And if you want to grab this file, I give it away for free over on my website, which is 3dcharacterworkshop.com. You can go grab it and play with it, as well as all these brushes and this user interface. So,
oh yeah, these brushes are not to sleep on either. You have an amazing pack of brushes that you've just thrown to the community, and I don't know anybody who doesn't use them personally. So they're amazing.
Yeah, it's really fun to see when people post like, their live streams and things like that, and I'm like, I recognize that brush. Yeah, it's really fun to see, including other streamers here. Yep. Yeah, it's really fun.
So we shared the link to your website, so people who want to go get the brushes and this startup file, definitely go check that link out.
Thanks. So yeah, so this is just a sphere, just a default sphere that comes with it, and you can see it's just a sphere that's been subdivided down. And by default, Sculptris Pro is not turned on. Here, let me go over to a move brush. Well, I'm going to grab a snake hook brush just so we can have a brush that is active with Sculptris Pro. So Sculptris Pro, in this interface, you can turn it on right here. And then underneath the stroke, this is the big difference, is by default, the density of that brush is set to the size of the brush. I don't like to work that way personally. I like to have it set to the scene size rather than the brush size. So then what happens is the triangles will stay consistent and I can stay in control, rather than if I zoom here, I'll just demonstrate what I mean by that. So if I were to activate my smooth brush and start to smooth this down, you can see the size of the triangles as per the size of this brush. But if I made this brush huge and tried to smooth, it would make gigantic triangles, right? Or if I made a really small brush, it would make really small triangles. Well, what if I wanted a very big brush but I wanted to keep this same size triangles. I couldn't do it. Well, you can. And the way you do it is you go into Stroke, and you go to Sculptris Pro, and you turn off this adaptive size. That's what it means by attaching the density to the brush, is adaptive size. So you go ahead and turn that off. And then it's also tied to this subdivide size. So this is the new slider that you're going to need to use to change that triangle size. And so just by default, this is a size 1 of triangle. If I go, so I have it actually on my interface next to Sculptris Pro right here. If I roll this down a little bit and then try it again, so this is closer to the triangle size that I use to block out my characters, typically their faces, when I'm working on their faces. And then if I want to go even smaller, I can. And you can see that they've cranked up the density. So it didn't used to go further than, I believe it used to be 0.1. Let me see.
Yeah, now it goes much smaller.
Yeah, I think this is the lowest you could go. And I would run into issues where I would need just a little bit more density. So yeah, it was actually 0.05 before.
Yeah.
So it used to only go this small, now it goes this small.
Yep.
Okay.
And real quick too, just to verbally, because I answered the question in chat, but yes, this works with smoothing as well. In fact, a little pro tip for anyone who's just using ZBrush Core Mini is if you're rebuilding your mesh, this also works for all versions of ZBrush, of course. If you're rebuilding your mesh, but you want to work on a specific spot, but you don't want to actually smooth down the mesh overall, take your smooth brush, kick the intensity down to like nothing, and then rebuild with Sculptris, and you can rebuild the surface without actually doing a lot of smooth damage to the mesh, and then you can go back on and sculpt on top of that dense mesh. So you can control where you have patches of density versus just big quads. So it's a really cool trick, especially if you're playing with Core Mini, because we limit, there's a limit on how much geometry you can actually use. So this is a really cool technique, even for just like smoothing stuff down. So, but now in full ZBrush, we took that and we dropped that down even more, so you get more density. And Shane, it's an awesome feature. I'm sure you love it.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, it's almost like focused. Oh gosh, what is it called? Focus decimation, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like you control the decimation on where you want it to happen. But they've also added a picker. So let's use an example where I'm working at this density of triangle, right? And I want to, and I've worked on the eyes, and my eyes have a tighter density over here. And I want to remember or recall that density, because right now it's just a guess. I'm like, oh, if I didn't write it down, it would just be a guess as far as like what was the density that I was at over here, because I want to put that around my mouth or something like that where I need some more density. And instead of trying to remember or writing it down, they've actually added a picker. So I can go up to this stroke, and it says picker right here, which is something I need to put out on my interface for 2023. But if you click on this button and you drag it, you can see that the subdivide size slider is changing based off of where I'm at on the mesh. So I can even pick something that is not Sculptris Pro, that's just geometry, like up here, and then when I go to use it, it's going to try and make the triangles something like what was there already. So you can kind of see that that density matches the quad density, which is super cool. So again, I can go over to this picker and I can pick this really dense area and then just kind of smooth it out, and you can see it goes super dense and it keeps the same density. Also, just so you guys know, there's also this tessellate, and that's what this slider right here is on my interface. You can find it under maybe help me out, geometry tessellate. There you go. Geometry tessellate, and it's right here. But just so you know, you don't have to push this button. All you have to do is slide the slider. And what it does is it caches what your original mesh looked like before you did it. So if I grab this slider and I just barely go to the left, you'll see that it's going to flood fill the entire mesh with what I call Sculptris Pro density, right? And if you keep going, it's going to keep refining that detail more and more until it starts pulling in what that mesh used to be because it's cached. It will, like if I had a big, like a cut or some form of geometry information under there, it was just a smooth sphere, so you can't really see it. But the further down you go, you can kind of realize that. So anyway, it's very cool. I use Tessimate all the time.
No, that's super cool. And also, just to, I'm going to use your lingo here because I think it's awesome. A ZBrush gem is you don't have to use the picker button too. You can go up to the subdivide size slider, left click or mouse click and hold and drag. So just click and drag, and you don't even have to use the picker. The picker's there so that you could, but just do that.
Look at that.
Way faster.
That is a gem. That's a hidden gem. Sweet. Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, forget it. I'm not putting that picker button out there.
Yeah, and true as well for Dynamesh. You don't have to use the picker button on the Dynamesh. You can also use the slide as well. Just click and drag that on over, and then you can pick your size. So
nice.
Both ways you can do it.
Love it. Love it. Thank you for that. Very cool. So yeah, from 2023, the update, that's the biggest thing that I use other than Redshift. So really, really like that feature. So thank you, Maxon, ZBrush, all you guys. Good stuff.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. I'm loading up my lighting file that's quite large. But while I'm loading that up, I'd like to share some of the images that I rendered using the new Redshift inside of ZBrush, which is fantastic. I love it. And let's see. So I'll just pull up some of these. So this is my render settings. I'm going to share with you how I set this up and how I rendered it. But in the meantime, you probably saw some of these images in the preview as you're waiting to watch the stream. But this is a chameleon that I sculpted on the live stream, on my Monday live streams, and it's designed by Shafi Ahi. I don't know if I'm saying that name correctly, but if you could drop that in the chat there. Fantastic designer. I love his characters so much, and they just scream to be sculpted. So, and I just set this up with a material. So I was on the beta test for this, and I'd reached out to Ian and asked him if he could work out some kind of a material that looks like vinyl. And he worked hard behind the scenes and came back with this vinyl material. And this entire thing is filled with that vinyl material except for his eyes. His eyes have, there's actually this eye material that I put on there. But I love how it makes it look like vinyl plastic or kind of a harder plastic. It's really nice. And then
also sharing the concept artist, by the way, for anyone who wants to go check out the concept artist for these pieces. We noted them earlier, but I'm going to go ahead and share their concept now. It's in the chat.
Yeah, this is another one by the same artist, Shafi Ahi. An artist from, I think he's from Iran. And yeah, just really, really good stuff. This is one of my favorites of his. It just, I actually, I just love, it's kind of like that feeling of Up, you know, the movie Up, of the older guy and the younger kids all really excited to hear his stories and things like that. So they're going on a trip, you know?
Yeah,
exactly. What's the story behind this?
I love it.
As you'll notice, this whole thing is filled again with that vinyl material. And I just have a infinity floor on the bottom and the back that has, I worked out a material that would add some tiny bit of reflection, not too much that's going to call your attention, and then just really super soft shadows. And then I got an HDR from what is it called again? Polyhaven. Polyhaven, that's right. Yeah. We'll get into that after this, but I just kind of wanted to break it down for you a little bit. And then this is all just poly paint. All the color is just poly paint. I just hand painted it. So and it just captures the details really, really nice. If I zoom in on this, oh, it looks like I should have subdivided that more. But even just little details like this cut, you know, and this is just all hand painted. This is all hand painted. Yeah, it just turns out really nice, and nice soft shadows, very good reflections. Yeah, it's really fun.
Real
And then
quick, before you
go
get
ahead.
too started, we had a question coming in about
Okay.
wanting to see some of the new masking features. So Shane has a presentation he's going to go through, and if we don't touch too much on those before the stream is end, I can come in too and answer some in-depth masking questions as well. So we do have. I'm noting that question down. So after the stream, I can answer a couple of those questions too.
Cool. Yeah, I would like to know that as well.
You got it.
I haven't used it as much as I should have. But and to throw back, I wanted to you know, everybody knows me for this character Kate from No One Lives Forever, that old game. And I actually walk people through how to build that character inside of ZBrush. That was my first release of my course 5 years ago, and I wanted to re-render her in here to see what she looked like in here, and just awesome. I love it. So I rendered her very, very high resolution. So if we zoom in, like on this gun here, you can see the details and just those really nice edges, super soft edges. And yeah, her face and just the hair and all that kind of stuff. I put
fantastic.
the same material on her eyes, the shiny eye material. It's really nice. Get some good reflections in there. Yeah, it turned out, I love it. And the detail, like you can see my painting issues, but it's yeah, it's super nice.
Oh, it looks so good. And the fact that it's super high res and that's sharp. You're zooming in and I'm seeing those edges really clean. That's so cool.
Yeah, it only gets noisy when you zoom in like this far. So it's about, I don't know what the 100% is, but oh, here it is. So it's rendered at this height. This size is 1:1. So yeah, pretty sweet. And then I wanted to render out my cowboy just to try him. And this cowboy I modeled during my live streams. You can watch it back. But again, the size I rendered him at is this. So this is the size. But I also had this idea for this painted plastic material. You know when you take like a plastic model and you paint it with like Tester's model paint or something like that, and you're trying to make it look like metal. It's not really metal, it's painted metal. So I made this material called painted metal. And so it's like you hand painted this with that plastic paint. And so there's also this really nice metal material that comes with Redshift if you want realistic metal, which worked. I actually put it on my next character that I'm going to show you, and it was a little too much, but it worked out really nice. But yeah. I wanted to put that painted metal on all the metal bits, and yeah, it turned out really nice.
It looks really good. It's so cool, especially for the style too. Like everything is clean and concise, and it just looks really just tack sharp, which I personally love that look. So
thanks, appreciate it. Yeah, it looks like a painted 3D print if your painting skills were top notch.
Yeah.
You know. So yeah, I really love how these little details like catch the light. You know, these little shadows and cuts and things. But even this boot worked out. This is a little too clean for this guy though. Have to add some grunge to it. But anyway, yeah, I really like how it turned out. My camera did freeze on my side.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, did your camera freeze on your side?
It did. I see it.
You wanna? We could take a second if you want to try to reset your camera.
I don't. How do I do that in here?
Maybe just turn off and on the camera again.
Well, it's across the room.
Oh,
might be. I was just gonna like.
If it's too much of a hassle, it'll be okay.
Let me stop it and start it again, maybe.
Okay. All right. Yeah, these are looking awesome. Shane's going to go ahead and see if he can fix his camera real quick. If not, no big deal. We'll continue through because we could still see ZBrush, which is awesome. But and yeah, so Tom did just I wrote an answer in the chat, but just to clarify, yeah, the Redshift materials in ZBrush are ZBrush materials, but a lot of the settings are very much the same as Redshift and like Cinema 4D. So a lot of my tests, I actually was building materials in Cinema 4D Redshift and then getting an idea of how I wanted that material to look so I can understand Redshift a bit more, and then I would move into ZBrush and then rebuild that material. and then I would go ahead and save that material out. So you can do some tests like that, because Redshift across the board works the same in ZBrush as it would Cinema 4D, as it would for Maya, Blender, and I think it's even in 3ds Max. So in all those applications, it does function the same way. And since this is our first iteration, there's a lot of stuff we definitely want to do to improve the experience. So as we come up with those features and roll them out and stuff, they'll be easier and easier to go through. So, but in the meantime, as you material test, they are currently just ZBrush materials at the moment. But we do have plans to, like, I'm building materials, I'm testing materials. Check out our newsletter as well if you're not a part of it, because we're going to be dropping materials in the newsletter as we go through. And if you create materials as a community, definitely tag me, and I'll take a look at those materials and stuff like that. Maybe we can like start up a thread somewhere like ZBrush Central and have people like start adding materials that would just help each other out. So fun stuff, lots of ideas, lots of lots of thoughts. So,
Right. Hey, I'm back, by the way.
all right, welcome
That
back,
was weird.
Jay.
That
Welcome
was
back.
weird. So, yeah, I have some materials that I'm going to share as well. So I have
Cool.
the floor that I made for all of these renders, and the painted metal. I'm going to share that as well. And then hopefully I'm going to make a project to share. So you can just drop in your characters and just hit go, hopefully. That's the dream, right?
Yep.
So, all right, one more character to show. This is one of the most recent characters I've modeled. This is Wolverine, done by the amazing Sean Galloway. He's otherwise known as Cheeks. Love his works. I worked with Sean a little bit on Disney Infinity, and it's just, yeah, and I had to model it. One of my students was modeling it as well. I'm just like, do you mind if I model that with you? I was showing him some of the forms and stuff and the volumes. So anyway,
cool.
so I actually rendered him out at this size, you can see, and this, I just love the detail again, how much it just captures just enough to have like just the subtle highlights across here and the subtle shadows. See how soft this shadow is?
Yeah.
If you ever tried to render out in default ZBrush PBR, if you just hit PBR render, it's like the hardest shadows you can ever imagine.
Yep.
So it's just like you have to go in and do some adjustments, but this is like, yeah, it's really a step up. And this is again my painted metal here, and yeah, that vinyl material is applied to everything except for the like the blades, of course. And you can see how the global illumination has bounced light as well, so it's bouncing the blue from this glove off onto the metal blades here. Just all these little nice things. You can see the subtle reflection in the floor right here, so it looks like a toy sitting on some kind of a floor like that. So anyway, yeah, any questions about these renders right before I get into demoing the whole thing?
Well, we did have a couple questions.
Sure.
One of them was, can you do a turn with ZBrush? Can you do a turn render with Redshift? The answer is yes. Same exact way you would do a turn. Once you do the render, you just go up to movie and then hit your turntable, and then that would create a turn. Or you can use the timeline as well.
So somebody said, is this just a click on render? Are there separate lights involved? So for this particular one, what I did was I just went and found an HDR image from Polyhaven. There's a whole just library of free HDR images that you can use, and they're just different scenes, and you can just go grab them. Here, I can just...
I shared it. I got you.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yep, I got you.
Great. Thank you.
That's what I'm here for.
I was
here to help you.
I was gonna show the home page here, so they
Cool.
could see it really quick, if that's okay.
Yep. And then we
yeah. So yeah, you can just click on any of these and download them for free and use them in your stuff. So that's what I used. Is I just grabbed one from there and loaded it into my scene, and then I didn't add any extra lights in here. I actually turned. You can use the ZBrush lights, like the ones on the little preview sphere. So if let me close these. If we go back to, and those of you who said they love my work, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Happy to share, happy to share. So, so if you go to light, you can see this preview sphere, and you can turn on all these different lights and use a bunch of different lights. And the way you adjust them is by moving this little dot around on the sphere. So you can get like rim lights and things like that, and you can use them in conjunction with the HDR lighting setup. So it's really nice, but all of the particular ones that I've been showing you, I have one light showing, but this is kind of I don't know if I'd call it a hidden gem, but something that you should note is you need to have a light on, like Motel 6, right? You need to have a light on, and you need to have it set to, if you don't want to use it, it needs to be very, very, very low, but not completely off. Otherwise, your material previews will not be previews, because this is using the light to show these previews. It'll just be messed up. So if you lose your previews of those materials, just make sure you have a light turned on. I was just asking Ian that this morning. So anyway, but you can use these lights in conjunction with your HDR image. And where you load that HDR image is right here in the light menu underneath background. You can see it right here. You just click on here, and it's just like loading up any image that you bring into Spotlight or anything like that. You just go get that image. Like I can click on it right here and just import right there and just go get it. It's already loaded in. This one's called Small Studio 3, I think. And you can see it's just a studio with some lights set up. And then you can adjust the longitude and latitude of that HDR image, and you can adjust the size of it. Remind me where the size is again, Ian?
So the sizing of it is actually tied to the perspective camera. So if you go up to the draw, so if you want to see more of that in the background, then you would actually drop your perspective camera. In this case, you're using an infinite background.
Right. So let me turn that off.
So yeah, we can turn that off. Yeah. And then there are people who are curious on how you make an infinite background. That you already got curiosity there.
We're going to show you. So let me zoom out just so you can actually see this scene. And then I'll talk about the HDR image. Yeah. Okay, so if I look how I just made this thing gigantic, just so any character I put on there, this would work for. But all this is it's just a cube with the sides deleted, and then I just beveled the backside, and then I flipped the normals. I'll show you. I'll actually build one for you. But and that way, it doesn't matter how big my character is, it will be covered by this guy. And then what you can do is, well, before I get off into the weeds talking about all this stuff, let me show you this. That's my my ADHD kicking in there.
No worries, you're good.
Okay, so you can see if I turn this infinite background off, you can see the HDR image fuzzy back here, and it's really, really big. So, and you'll only see that if perspective is turned on. So if you turn perspective off, it's going to turn to a color. If you turn it on, you're going to see the HDR image. So I used to say HDRI image, which is like saying HDR image. So
we all did. Don't worry. I can admit the same thing.
So document, you said it's tied to the camera.
Yeah, so under draw, and then you would change your actual focal length and distance.
Yeah, I have this focal length set to crazy. Yeah. So maybe 35. There you go. And now you can see the size of that image back behind him.
And the idea here too, just to expand on it a little bit, is that if you'll be using the camera and the perspective if you wanted to place your character within the scene that the HDR is providing. So if you want your Wolverine character to be standing on this infinite background, then you would want to adjust the camera to fit the scene as best as you can. So that was the idea behind it, which is why it's tied to that perspective. So you can control that function and really place your character and make it seem believable when that perspective is correct to the background that's being provided.
Right. And also, if you land on a camera that you really, really like, and you want to know how to store that camera, you can do that in the same drop-down menu underneath channels right here. There's a store cam right here. So you can just hit that, and you can name it like best cam ever. and then you store it right there, and you can recall it. So I can go back to that draw menu, and if I like turn it like this, I can go back here and click on best cam ever, and it pops it right back to where it was. So that way you can zoom out and do all the things you need to do and just recall that camera. You can also flip through the different cameras if you have a bunch of them. Like, for example, I have several characters loaded into this scene, and I set up a different camera per character because they're different sizes. So, yeah, it's pretty nice. So, also, you'll notice that this shape is really not normal. It's not like your regular viewport background. And the reason I chose this shape is because I like to I like to post my stuff on like Instagram, right? And this is Instagram settings. So in your camera, what you can do is go underneath the document, and you'll see it says width and height. You can go look up the dimensions of whatever social media you want to post to, or whatever you need. Like if you're going to do like a video or something like that, like a turntable, you can type in those numbers right here, and that will be your document size, and that will be your render size. So, and then when you're done, you need to hit resize right here. And what that's going to do is that's going to smash your model down to the background when you hit resize. So you might want to write this down because it's kind of tricky. So when you hit resize, again, here, I'll just do it. I'm gonna change this just a little bit. Okay, and then I'll hit resize, and it'll say, yeah, it's not an undoable option. Okay, so now it's gonna do this, and what it's gonna do is bake your character down to the background. So first thing you need to do is hit Control N to clear that, and then you draw your character on the background again, and then you hit Edit. Okay, and now it's an editable guy again. Okay, and you'll notice that my camera's all zoomed in, and there is kind of a hidden zoom that you guys need to know about. Underneath document right here, actually on the default menu, it's not hidden, it's actually out on the right hand side over here. You'll see it. Okay, and this is different than holding down right click and control and zooming this way. It's different. It's actually zooming the document, not the character. Okay, so if you go to document, zoom. So if you guys have been using this zoom button to zoom the character like you would think you would zoom it, you should probably not do that because you're zooming the document like this.
Yeah.
Not the character. Use either the left click Alt let go to zoom it, or right click Control to zoom. Okay, I think left click Control works as well. There's 3 different ways to zoom. Okay, so now I'm going to turn perspective back on. What's that?
Which way do you zoom? Do you right click?
I'm in the right click army with Paul.
Because dude, I've been converted. Paul converted me. I do it so much now. So I've tied my pen button to right click, and I do it all the time now. He converted me.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. So just so you know, the right click I set to my front button on my pen, and then that way, if you're zoomed way, hey, what's up, Paul? If you're zoomed way in like this, right, like way in, if you're not in the right click army and you're used to clicking on the background of the canvas, you have to click in the gutters. You're a gutter. You're in the gutters. So to rotate your model, you have to click down here in the gutters or over here. Yeah. Right? But if you're in the right click army, you can hold down right click and hover over the top of your model and hover. Yeah, it was a debate, right? It was a debate back in the day. What's the best navigation? Yeah.
They would go back and forth for a long time. That's such a like throwback, but it's so true. I mean, because I can tell you, the F button, right, full frames your camera. So if I was zoomed all the way in, I would actually hit F, so I wouldn't move my pen so much, rotate it, and then zoom all the way back in. I was just doing way too much work. Way too much.
Way too much. Get out of there. Get out of there. Okay, so so that's how to resize your document. And what I like to do is I like to have my settings be what I'm going to render my character at. So again, going to documents, I'll set the width and the height of what I want it to do. And then I'll go through and I'll do all of my render test settings. And I'll test, because it's actually smaller than I'm going to do my final render. Okay. And also what I'll do is I will dock the light and I will dock the render over here on the left hand side. So the render menu, I'll pull it over here, and the light menu. That way I have access to all the sliders and things I'm going to need. Sometimes I'll even dock the material, but then it starts to get really long. But you can dock the material over here too, and that way you have quick access to it. Okay, so what I was going to say is, after you, let me get back here. Where is it at? Under Redshift Render. Redshift Renderer, right here. I was just going to show you this render quality underneath the Redshift Renderer. I'll leave that at 5, and I'll have my document at the size that I'm going to eventually want it to be. Okay, so for example, this one is just for Instagram. But when I'm all done and I want to do final render, I'll do 2 steps. I'll crank this render quality to 10, and I will also go to my document and I'll hit double. And that will double the size of your document, and it will make it, it will make it really big, and it will get that detail. So that's how I got my really big renders with that I showed you guys earlier of Kate and the cowboy. Is I made them really big, and that way when you upload them to Instagram, it will be the right aspect ratio, but it will be super duper crisp because you rendered them at twice the size that they need to be, and it will shrink them down. So okay, does that make sense to everybody? Is there any questions that were?
I don't see any directly. I'm
Okay.
answering a couple questions that's about something else.
Okay, sure.
Student teacher license, that sort of stuff. I'm sharing all that and tutorials as well. Links are in the chat for anybody who wants to have tutorials that we offer for free.
Nice. So yeah, again, this draw going to 35, and you can also, I've adjusted my HDR image, so you can go in and set it to 1, so it's, or is it to 0? What's default? I can't recall. Yeah, and you can also adjust your field of view right here as well. You can flatten it or warp it depending on how fisheyed you want to get. So there you go, and you can see more of your shot or less of it. Yeah, by messing with that. Okay, so then what I'll do again is I'll make that infinite background like this, and I can show you how to do that. And then I'll just kind of center my character however I want it in this frame. I think this tall, if your character is in a tall standing position, this works really well. If it's longer, it's better to do a different ratio, you know. And then what's really nice is I usually turn off the floor, because the floor will actually render as a floor, so which is the grid. So the floor grid, if you have that turned on, it will act as a floor. So you don't need to have that infinite background if you just want a floor. And you can also put this floor color. I can't recall which one it is, the left or the right one, but there's actually it's the left one. Okay, there's actually a shadow catcher underneath the poly paint materials. You can turn that on, and it will make the floor just catch the shadow, but you don't have to set up anything else. It will just do the shadow. But I also wanted reflections. And if I want reflections, then I have to do it the way I've done it, which is set up in a infinity background, okay? So that way, I just I started out with the plastic material, and then I made it reflective and set it to the level that I wanted it, and then just renamed it reflective floor. So what's nice is you can start out with these Redshift materials and just tweak them to whatever you want. So to make this painted metal, I just started with one of these metal materials and just dropped down the metalness of it, so it looked painted rather than real metal. So it's really nice to start with an existing material and just adjust it. That way you don't have to dig into it too much to try it out. So, all right. Oh yeah. So you see, somebody was saying if you're a student of the 3D Character Workshop, the 3D Character Workshop does qualify for an EDU version of Maxon 1, which is fantastic for 6 months. So if you're not a student and you want to be a student, you get 6 months of Maxon 1. So it's a really good time to join us.
Yep, and it's extremely affordable. Seriously, check it out in your area. Just click the link, and all the information is there.
Thanks so much.
Yep.
Okay, so where was I at? And then you need to assign the material to each piece of your character. Okay, that's a big. You can use default materials like my favorite Skin Shade 4. You can use those, but they're not gonna take full advantage of what Redshift is going to give you. So it's best to use a Redshift material if you're going to be rendering. Okay, so essentially, a material acts as like a clear coat on a car. It's something that wraps over the top of your colors, and it will change those colors if you have a color in the material itself. Okay, so you don't. I usually avoid any color in my materials because I like to use poly paint for my materials. So I just get that to go underneath and the material on top. And the best way to assign this, and this is another addition to ZBrush 2023, is you used to use fill object. Here, let me show you. I'm going to grab my paintbrush and go up to color, and there's this button right here called fill object. This is how I used to fill my objects, with either color or material. And you can see right here, there's material, there's color, which is RGB, red, green, blue, and then there's both. There's material and color. So if you're just dealing with materials, make sure you only have material selected, and then you can fill it here with this fill object, and that will either fill RGB or material or both, depending on what you have chosen up there. But there's also a different way, and I need to change my ways, because underneath here, underneath poly paint right here, there is also another button that says fill color. Okay, and this does the same thing. This fills with material, it fills with RGB, but the difference is this exists in the tool menu rather than the color menu. So why do you care? Okay, if you go up to your subtools, so I'm just going to grab this arm, let's say. I'm going to turn off Sculptris Pro. Okay, I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to go to, let's just say leather. I'll just grab leather, and then I'll fill the color here, and that will fill this with leather material. You can see how it changed right there. Okay, this is just a preview. It doesn't give you what it's going to look like when you render it. It's just a preview. So then you can go to your subtool menu, and you can open two menus at once, by the way, if you hold down Shift while you open it. Otherwise, it'll close this other menu. And then there's a button underneath here that's called Apply Last Action to All Visible Subtools. So you can click on this, and it will fill all of your visible subtools with that same material. If you use the fill color from this menu, it will not. Okay, you won't have access to that button. I had to ask Ian that this morning. So that's just a little asterisk. So be on the lookout for that. Okay.
Yeah. I'll clarify too, just a little bit more in depth.
Sure.
Any undoable action under the tool menu specifically will allow you to use the Apply Last Action button, as well as the folder option, which is in the folder cog wheel. However, just so you know, if you're trying to fill a material and then you do another action, then it will no longer become available unless that action was undoable. So the immediate last action you did, like fill a material, will be available. Those buttons will highlight themselves. If there's no last action available, the button becomes grayed, and then you can't use it. It won't let you click on it. So if that button's available, that means that it's possible to do it with that feature.
Right. So, okay, very cool. So yeah, I'm gonna go back and grab that vinyl material and fill it back in. Okay, so that looks weird. I think I grabbed the wrong one. Maybe I'll just undo it. Okay, back to this. So, and also ZBrush, the Redshift has render region. So render region is a really, really great way to tweak your render without having to render your entire character over and over again. So if you're having a specific problem area, like say if your reflections in the floor aren't working right, you can just render a little square of that region. So I'm going to try it. Hopefully it doesn't crash or kick me out or whatever, because it does take a bit of my CPU. So you just hit Control R and it will just render out the region wherever your mouse is when you hit Control R. So hopefully it will work. It's crunching. So also the first time it renders, it's caching a whole bunch of stuff. So the second time it renders, it's going to be quicker. But the first time always takes a bit. There you go. So inside this little square is what it really looks like. And outside of the square is a preview. So let's say you wanted to check the metalness of these claws over here. I can just hit Control R over these claws, see how much faster it is. So the second time it renders, everything else is cached, like the position, the lights, and all that stuff. So after you render once, it's really quick. So if I wanted to check, like say the reflection in the floor, I can just go render region down here and render that bit out, which is super nice.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also too, while you're talking about render region, just want to call out, if you could open up the render menu real quick, there's a slider I wanted to point to. So so the preview size in ZBrush, it's just above depth of field. That is set to 512, which is a really good quality. But if you would like to improve the speed of your Redshift even faster, I would drop that to 128. And then that will update Redshift. And then when you want to create a final render, then you can kick it back to 512 and then adjust some of these to get it, because a final render is obviously that'll take a little bit more time. But while you're making these adjustments and testing stuff out, I kick it to 128, which then just speeds it up even faster, allows me to get the look and feel. And then I'll kick it back to 512 when I want to do a final render.
Somebody was asking if you can adjust the size of the render preview. Is that a thing?
So actually that's going to be adjusted based on the camera size. So for example,
size,
if you're at like 1920 by 1080, you're going to get bigger bucket size than you will if you are at something that's like 4,000 by 3,000, which is just ridiculous, right? So, so the size of your canvas viewport will actually determine the size of the bucket. So the less pixels you have, the bigger the bucket size will naturally be. The smaller, the more information it has to process.
Right. So I bet I could hit Shift R and render this whole thing pretty quick. So I'm running dual 1080s. So old cards, but I have two of them. Two old cards. Cool. And it's it's surprisingly good as far as speed.
Oh, absolutely.
And again, this is quite a big render. It's not quality 10 under the render quality right here, and it's not double size like I showed you with the Kate and the cowboy renders. But this, I mean, look how fast it's going. It's going pretty dang quick for having dual old cards.
Yeah, honestly, that's super impressive because I'm running a 3080 Ti myself.
Okay,
and
how does that go?
It's good. Yeah, I love it. But yeah, the fact that you're running older gen cards and you're getting these results, and we're live streaming. This is something that I definitely always talk about too, because I can never render on a live stream without becoming robotic.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I mean, obviously the better specs anyone has when you're doing rendering is always going to be an improvement. But the fact that you're on older gen cards and you're getting phenomenal results is super impressive. So happy to see it, man.
Yeah, Thomas is asking if this is GPU rendering. It is. Because, yes. Yeah, so I guess the difference between if you own Redshift or if you don't is GPU rendering or CPU rendering, correct?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, let me clarify
If you
this
can, okay,
too to go officially on record. I want to
okay,
clarify this for everyone.
okay.
Okay. So we mentioned it during the release, but if you have a perpetual license of ZBrush 2023, you get the Redshift bridge, but Redshift is subscription only, so it's not activated by default. So you have to have a subscription to Redshift as well, which is why the Maxon One Suite is such a great deal for its dollar value because you get so much with it. With ZBrush subscription only, so no Redshift, no Maxon One, you're only holding a ZBrush subscription, you will get CPU Redshift included. But if you would like GPU Redshift and only have ZBrush as a subscription, then you will need a subscription to Redshift. But just note that your subscription to Redshift is not only for ZBrush, it supports every application that does Redshift rendering. So, for example, Blender, Maya, 3ds Max, Cinema 4D, those all support Redshift. So your Redshift subscription can be used in other places, not just ZBrush. And I really want to make that clear because for the value of what it is, you can put it in multiple applications. And even on this last month, we at Maxon have done a Demystify series, which I could share in the chat here in a second, that covers Redshift in Blender, Redshift in Maya, Redshift in Cinema 4D, and Redshift in ZBrush, which I personally ran that course. So I will share that. So definitely when you're looking at the Redshift subscription, do not look at it as, well, it's only in ZBrush. If you have other applications it works with, it will work there as well. So you're getting a lot more for your value if you look at it in that sense.
Which, if you think about it, it's really nice because then you only have one renderer to learn, right?
Yep.
Because Redshift is not a standalone product like, say, Keyshot or something like that. It's embedded or integrated into other applications. So you just access it via whatever software you're rendering in. So that's why this is so amazing to me that we're getting a render out of ZBrush. Like, I know it's with Redshift, but it's inside ZBrush environment. That means I don't have to go prepare my model in crazy ways to go send it elsewhere, which I had to do in the past. I can just render it, check it, and then keep on sculpting. You know, there's no stop. There's no hitch in my jig, as they say.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And that's the benefit too that we're showcasing during these live streams. You know, having Shane and everyone else on. Paul's going to be next week. Then we'll have Mike Thompson. It's that we really find the benefit of being able to do test renders to get even final product shot renders quickly, showcase your character off really well within ZBrush without having to do all the optimization that would be required in most other render engines. So it's nice that you get to kind of come through, play with it, test it out, and see what's going on. And you can even get such amazing final results. But if you want to take it to a next step further, then that's what's like, you know, let's say your model gets approved. Shane, you sent your model off, it got approved. Your boss says, yeah, this is amazing. Great. Now you can focus on optimizing, but they've already seen a sample. And this sample could be sent to the render team and be like, this is what he was getting when we approved it. You know, take a look at this render, and you can even share settings back and forth. You can say, these are the settings I use in ZBrush. And while ZBrush Redshift materials are not directly connected to Cinema 4D or other applications that use Redshift, so a lot of the settings when you're using like index of refraction or you're adjusting those sliders, those settings, you can look at what you did and then you can replicate that in other applications. So there's a really good chance that you know, you can get approvals done quicker, you can get renders done faster. And Shane's not optimizing his mesh, and he's doing like what, 8 million points you got right now?
yeah. This is not. Yeah, it's not retopologized by any means. It's not animation ready. It's just this would be, so if somebody came to me like, well, just pretend that Sean Galloway is just like, hey, can you model this up? Because I want to print it and maybe possibly sell it, you know. And
Yeah.
I could model this for him and send it over, which I have done, as a toy render, just like this, and saying, hey, this is what it could look like in manufacturing, you know. And then he could look at it and give me feedback, and also say if the actual toy factory is going to be manufacturing this, you could send this off as a possible color proof, or, you know, this is what we need it to look like in the end, which is something that we did on Disney Infinity a lot. We would render out our stuff and send it off to the factories and stuff, and they would use that as a guide, you know. So super cool. So we're almost out of time. Let me run you through how I make an infinity wall, I guess is what you call it. And also, if you don't want to make your own, I just became aware that 2023 ships with one. So this project right here, if you double click on this bad boy, it's not my ruler file, so it's not like my optimized setting, but it has an infinity wall right here.
Yep.
And with a little ball, and you can come in here and you can test out your HDR images in here. You can test out your materials with this little guy. You can test out your reflections, your shadows, and all of that stuff, and then get it to a sweet spot, a place where you like the way it looks, and then start dropping characters in this file to render. Yeah, this is a really good test file. So the way I would make it is I would just, and there's, as we said, there's like a million ways to model something, right? There's so many different ways. But the way I like to do it is, let's see, let me just, oh, this is a lot of parts in here. Okay. So I'm just going to grab one of these parts.
If you want to use the pizza box and then group it in a folder and then apply last, that works.
It's all good. I was just like, well, I'm going to turn perspective off for a second. And then, okay, I'm just going to replace this one. So if you guys didn't know this, if you have your gizmo showing and you click on an insert multi-mesh, it will replace whatever object that you have selected unless it has subdivision levels.
Yep.
So that's the caveat there. Let me destroy those. Delete them. Okay, now if I click on this cube, it replaces it with a cube. Really small. We'll just make it bigger. Okay. And now, with this selected, I'm just going to go from the side and go to the select rectangle, hold down Control plus Shift, and then add Alt to it to delete those sides. And you'll notice I only have two sides. I'll turn on double just for a second. So you can see it just left these two sides. And then I can just say delete hidden. So there's my walls. And then I'm going to turn double back off because I want to flip this. I want to flip it so it's facing outward. And how you can do that is you go under display properties and flip. There we go. Now it's flipped the proper direction. And then we go under Z modeler, hover over this edge, hit bevel, and we're just going to split this guy about like that. Okay, and then hover over this edge and do an insert. Is it interactive elevation, Ian?
Yep, that
okay.
It is. Yep.
Okay. And then you start to, yeah, there we go. So up and down will add sections, and pushing left and right will bow it. Okay. So I'm just going to bow it like this. Okay. Then I'm going to hover over this and go turn that interactive elevation off.
Just click the one it was back on to the left, the specified elevation.
Oh, was it on this one? Okay. There
yeah, it's defaults to that one.
I'm not used to that one. Okay, so then click this edge and just add a bunch to be kind of even with the ones we just added here. Do the same thing to this edge. So one thing I did learn about this infinite background is that it's best to have, you don't want it super duper low res. You want to have some information there. Then I'll cut it this way to make squares. Maybe like that. Then we can just hit Control W to put it all into one poly group, and there we go. And now we can scale this to whatever we want, and we can grab a material like our reflective floor material. Let me see, where is it at? Why am I not seeing it? Why?
Is it to the left?
Oh,
3?
right.
Oh, there you go. Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, and then I want to subdivide this down too. Like Control D a couple times. Make it really smooth. Just like it was before. I essentially just recreated what we had before. And it looks like we can maybe move it down a little bit. So those feet are sitting on the floor. Okay, and now we can turn on perspective and zoom on in and right-click Army with
There
our
it
pen
is for the win.
to hover. Right, Paul? And then render this bad boy. So I'm going to just hit Control R. It might take a minute. I'm just doing a preview render region. That's a pretty low-res little ball that we got there.
Yeah.
Check it out. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's an actual Redshift model that they use, and then we brought it over, and then now we just use it for testing different materials. It's a really great little area to test stuff. And like Shane said too, if you just need an infinite background, you don't want to build it from scratch, it ships with ZBrush 2023, so you can just go ahead and grab that one.
Yep. But people were asking, you know, how did I make it? This?
Yeah.
I made mine before I knew there was one available. And you can also append that infinite background to whatever file that you have. You don't have to bring your model into that file. You can bring the infinite background into your file, which is probably the preferred method.
There you go.
So yeah, look at that nice shadow. Look at the floor reflection is working now. See that reflection from that material? Super nice. And notice the bounce light from the global illumination, like lighting up this purple. Super cool. So,
Shane, just one more time, what graphics cards are you using at the moment?
I'm using dual 1080s. I don't
Dual
know if they're TIs or not. They're just dual 1080s.
Yeah, I use a 3080, but to answer a question, when you're using GPU rendering, just make sure your drivers are up to date too. That's always helpful to ensure that you're going to be rendering really well with minimal difficulties. But Redshift does support a lot of cards, even these older ones, so it will recognize and use them very well. So if you're on an older GPU, like I have a 2080 at home on a personal computer, and Redshift renders really, really well. I just had to make sure that my drivers are up to date. So that's just recommended across the board on all render engines. Just make sure your drivers are up to date and current. And
it's so funny how fast tech moves because they're not that old. My 1080s were monsters like 3 years ago, maybe.
Dude, I remember back in high school. So for me, that was 2001 when I graduated. It's just to date myself for everyone. But it was interesting because I remembered back then everyone saying, if you see a billboard for the newest computer, that computer is already outdated before it hits shelves, just because technology was moving so fast, even back then. And it intrudes today. You see a brand new advertisement on something, and somebody's already coming out with something that's way better than what you're currently being sold. It's just not ready for development yet. So,
right.
I know. So yeah, 1080s. Like I just traded in a 1080 for my 2080 2 years ago.
Wow.
So yeah,
I need to do that. They're probably not worth the material they're made of. But hey, they render fast, so I'll keep and I can still play my games on a pretty high setting, so I'm good. But yeah, glad to make you smile, Paul. What's up, Leonard? Yeah, if anybody has any questions, one more thing I wanted to show was if you have a Redshift material selected and you open up the material modifiers section, I didn't really cover that too much. But you can open up any of those Redshift materials and see how their settings are set, and kind of play with them that way. They're nicely. This looks very overwhelming, but they're nicely grouped into what they do. So like all of the subsurface scattering stuff is here. The emissive stuff is here. The coat stuff. You know, they're all kind of grouped together. So you can just start playing with that. Play with the materials that comes with ZBrush. There's also a brand new set of materials, not just the Redshift poly paint, but the Redshift color. So if you're doing cars and heavy metal stuff, like, you know, mechs and things, you can use these already painted plastics that will kind of stomp the poly paint out. So just note that. But this is for like more realistic stuff. And just to end this, you can also use Redshift with all of the filters that come with ZBrush, which is awesome. Like you can use like the outlining filter to make it look cartoony, but with a nice Redshift render on the inside, or add noise or some kind of graphical post filter that works really nice, like depth of field and things like that. So yeah, it works. That's something you don't get with any other program other than ZBrush. You don't get the filters like if you're using it with another program. So yeah, take advantage of it. It's really fun. I need to do it more.
100%. Yeah. And then one other thing about HDRs as well is that ZBrush also now accepts the EXR file type, not just an HDR file type. So if you have an EXR, it will be supported in ZBrush.
Nice. I think that's exactly what I had loaded up. So going to Polyhaven, that's what they give you when you hit download is an EXR file.
Yep.
So yeah, that's super good. But
well, cool, man. Well, thank you so much, Shane. It's a pleasure to have you on. Before we do leave, maybe we can share my screen real quick, just because we did have a masking question about the new features. So I can quickly go over that and just kind of showcase what the new masking features are. Apologize, it'll be on a sphere. But
that's how we all demo. We demo on a sphere.
That's how we do it. But I definitely wanted to go over some of the stuff real quick for the new masking features. So under the tool menu, we have masking, and now we have mask region. There are a lot of different masking options, but the ones I love the most, obviously, that I use mask by cavity a lot when I have like deep cuts. That's super cool. But for the mask region, the new feature. So the biggest one right now that's really cool is if you have a mask, so something like this, right? And I'm just painting a nice clean mask. Instead of doing this the whole time and trying to clean it up, I can just click auto region and that will fill that section. Now, the way you really want to view this is, well, let's say I want to mask this section right here, right? And actually, let me subdivide this a little bit more because that's pretty low res. And just like, you're going to want to have a nice clean mask. So if I mask this section right here, and then I come over here and I mask this section right here, these are super intricate designs, right? And then I come through and I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do. Maybe I'll just sharpen that up a little bit by hitting Control Alt and tapping on the mesh, which will sharpen that. Or if you go under masking, you have an actual sharpen mask button. Then I can hit auto region and it's going to detect those walls and autofill everything at the same time. So this is really useful for designs with masking. I know a lot of artists that design like sci-fi space mechs, and they do a lot of masking tricks because masking also you can apply, like if you had lazy mouse turned on your masking brush, right? I can start to make my mask and then I can hold shift and do a straight line, let go. So I can make some really cool designs. So while I'm doing this, now go ahead, press Control here, do this, right? Through, and then do this and make some really cool designs. If I want that to be filled, I can hit auto region. The other cool thing, just to clear this mask for a second and to draw out some different masks shapes, boop, 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 just like this. And then maybe this one right here, right? And I'll sharpen this again because I want to have a nice clear mask. Let's say I have these designs, but I really just want this one right here to fill and not these. Well, this is where Analyze Region comes in. So the first thing is I'll go ahead and analyze the region and say, okay, now ZBrush recognized that there are 3 different mask types. And I'm going to put a little mask on the inside of the one that I want filled. And then when I hit fill region, it now detected all of those masking options and it filled the one that I wanted to. So again, when you're making designs with masking or you're trying to mask out super complex shapes, this is where you can analyze those regions and come through. And so again, I can make another mask off over here, and then I'm going to analyze that region because I made a new choice, but now it's I decided this one's going to get filled region, and now that's going to happen. So while this example is really simplified, think about when you're drawing out mask and how you use mask to block off certain areas, or eventually maybe you want that one area to be filled in, and it's not just as simple as a circle or a square, then this becomes really helpful. This also becomes really helpful if you have alphas that you're trying to use masking options on. So if you have your mask pen and you want to like insert an alpha, and those alphas have different portions that you want to maybe autofill, which I don't think I have a good one here, but you could use this feature to then select those different areas. I should have loaded one, but I don't have one here. But yeah, that's the general idea. So again, that's really just going through. You can either make a certain mask shape that is fancy and really intricate, and then you should make sure that it's a nice clean mask. Because again, if you have a hole through it like this won't work because it's not detecting the closed space. You want to make sure that it is a nice closed space, and then that will autofill. Or if you have different other shapes that you're trying to manipulate and you only want certain ones, analyze it, put a little mask indicator on the one you want to fill, then fill region. And then that will go ahead and come through and make sure that it fills those other ones as clean as possible. So that's the new masking feature. Really beneficial. Really, I've used it a lot, again, for a lot of different designs and being able to just kind of play around with new shapes. And yeah, so it's really cool. Hopefully you guys like it. It's a lot of fun. That being said, we're going to be wrapping up here in a second. So next week, we have Paul Gabry, who is in chat, actually. Hi, Paul. How's it going? Oh. He's going to be demonstrating hard surface with Redshift as well. So if you have your hard surface questions, your Redshift questions for that, he'll be covering that coming up next week. Same time at 11 a.m. to noon. But if we go over and we do like a little bit more, you know, Paul and I get together, we talk a lot. So definitely feel free to bring those questions there. And also, too, we'll be showing more of the 2023 features that we've been using in our workflow. Because, again, this whole version is about speeding up your workflow, making it easier as an artist to get to the final result quickly. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed the stream. Shane, super pleasure to have you, man.
Yeah, thank you. It's been fun. Yeah, I like showing people how to do this stuff, because it seems way more overwhelming than it actually is. You know, it's just infinite backdrop, couple materials, go. You know, load in your HDR image. Yeah, yep. It's not rocket science by any means.
No, but but
rendering can take a long time to polish, like to adjust all the sliders. So I don't want to make it seem like it's just one and done. There's a lot of slider tweaking that can happen, that can take a long time, because it's like adjust, render, you know, and make sure you utilize that Control R to render region, so you're not rendering the whole thing over and over and over again. So, yep. Oh my gosh, Gabriel Sora's in the chat. Hey, Gabe, yeah, love his stuff.
What's up, Gabriel? Yeah. Also, too, that render region is not new to 2023. That render region does exist in your perpetual license of 2022. So if all of you who are watching this are like, I want that feature in my 2022 for BPR rendering, it exists. It's in 2022. Go ahead, play with it. That's super fun. I'm not sure exactly when it was integrated, but it's been around for a while.
It's one of those secret slip it in.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. There it is. So
awesome. Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much, Shane. A pleasure as always. And I also make sure to check out the 3D Character Workshop, and also to the concept artists that were used, that Shane modeled from. I'm dropping those into the chat as well. So you can go follow those guys, because they're just amazing artists, just like yourself, Shane. So thank you guys. Have a good one. We'll see you next week. Same
Thanks,
channel,
everybody.
same time, same all that good jazz. So, all right. Bye.
See you.